Is.
How does a small frontline state, and we'll use Finland as our primary example here since they've got a population of just about 5.5 million people, how did they build a massive world-class military capability without completely bankrupting their national budget?
It's a huge question. And to understand the mechanics of how a country like Finland could actually pull that off, the blueprint points us toward, well, the ultimate modern case study. We really have to look at Turkey.
Okay, Turkey.
Yeah, because over the last 20 years or so, Turkey underwent this radical evolution. I mean, they transitioned from being a totally dependent, debt-ridden arms
Meaning they were basically just a customer for other nations' military hardware.
Exactly, just buying stuff off the shelf. But they went from that into becoming a global defense powerhouse.
Right.
And the playbook they used to get there is, well, it's what we are unpacking today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so it basically relies on weaponizing private industry and foreign capital. Like, they built a massive defense apparatus largely using other people's money.
I want to start with the foundational piece of this blueprint because to build this kind of military apparatus, you have to basically completely dismantle the traditional way weapons are developed. You are arguing that relying on standard government agencies is actually a massive liability for a small nation.
Oh, it is the single biggest mistake small nations make. They keep all their defense development trapped inside state-owned companies or, these massive bureaucratic ministries.
Because they're slow.
Think about the physical reality of a state agency. It is inherently sluggish. Every single decision has to pass through committees, budget approvals, public oversight.
Right, because they are playing with taxpayer money.
Exactly. So they're incredibly risk-averse. A failure in a government lab suddenly becomes this huge political scandal, and furthermore, a government ministry is highly vulnerable to political shifts.
Oh, like if an election happens.
Right. A new party takes over, and suddenly the entire focus of the defense ministry could just pivot. They might abandon a decade of research just because of a new administration.
So Turkey looked at that sluggish, vulnerable system and just decided to bypass it completely.
They essentially starved the traditional bureaucracy of its central role in innovation. I mean, instead of relying on state ministries to build the next generation of hardware, they fostered what the blueprint calls nominally private contractors.
Okay, and the most famous example here would be Baykar, right?
Yeah, Beakar, the private company that created the TV-2 and Akinci drones.
The dynamic between the state and the private company here is really what I find so interesting, because the government kind of steps back from micromanaging.
Yeah, they act more as an enabler.
Right. They give a private startup access to military testing grounds, state laboratories, foundational research.
Yep.
But the company itself operates with the aggressive agility of, like, a Silicon Valley tech startup.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Because standard government defense procurement often feels like waiting in line at the DMV.
Right. Forms in triplicate. Years of waiting.
Zero sense of regency.
Yeah.
But this model is like a Y Combinator tech startup, but for weapons. They are iterating designs in a matter of months, completely bypassing those heavy-handed state regulations. But, and I am struggling to see this part, how does structuring these programs as private entities specifically shield them from international pressure?
What do you mean?
Like, if a foreign power wants to shut down Turkey's drone program, couldn't they just sanction it anyway?
Well, no, because the legal distinction between a state ministry and a private commercial entity completely changes the geopolitical playing field. Let's walk through how a sanction actually works. Right. When a defense program is housed within a government ministry, it's a direct extension of the sovereign state. So if a foreign power wants to exert pressure, they can just easily slap diplomatic sanctions directly on that ministry.
Like freezing assets.
Right, freezing its assets in foreign central banks or cutting off its supply chains through direct state-to-state diplomatic channels.
Because the state is a massive, slow-moving target.
Exactly that. But when the entity developing the technology is a private commercial company, the diplomatic toolkit is, well, it's much harder to apply. A private firm operates under international trade law, not just state diplomacy.
Oh, wow. So they have different protections.
Yeah, and they can attract international venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
They use commercial banks rather than central banks, and they can form commercial partnerships across borders through, like, random subsidiary companies.
I see. So if one supply chain gets blocked,
a private startup can just pivot and find a new commercial supplier in a different country within weeks.
Right.
It creates this layer of plausible deniability and legal insulation. The private structure acts as a literal shield against the blunt force of international sanctions.
You are decentralizing the target. So Bringing this back to our frontline state, Finland. The application here suggests that Finland shouldn't try to build some massive state-run drone program inside their Ministry of Defense.
No, definitely not.
They should be aggressively subsidizing private, highly specialized domestic tech firms, small teams working on AI, drone autonomy, cyber defense.
Yeah, because Finland doesn't need a sprawling government bureaucracy to develop an AI algorithm for drone swarms. A team of, say, 50 brilliant software engineers in a private startup backed by state testing facilities but totally free from state red tape, they can innovate at a fraction of the cost and time of a government department.
Right, but okay, so you have built this agile private weapons startup, but there's a glaring mathematical problem here.
The population size.
Yes, we established that Finland only has 5.5 million people. You cannot sustain a Silicon Valley-style cash burn rate when your only customer is a tiny domestic army.
Right, the numbers don't add up.
Innovation costs a fortune, and the Finnish taxpayer simply cannot shoulder that burden alone.
And this is where we run into the brutal reality of economies of scale. The per-unit cost of a highly advanced military asset, let's say a surveillance drone, is just astronomical if you are only manufacturing 20 of them.
Because of the R&D.
Exactly. All of those billions of dollars spent on research, development, and factory tooling. It has to be divided among just those 20 drones. So Turkey realized early on that to fund its own military advancements without crushing its national budget, it had to force foreign buyers to foot the bill.
Yeah?
They had to turn their defense industry into an aggressive export engine.
And the numbers in the source material are just staggering. Turkey's defense exports skyrocketed to over $7 billion annually.
That's massive.
Private companies like Baykar are not just supplying the Turkish military, they are selling these drones to over 30 countries across Africa, Central Asia, Europe. That brings a massive influx of foreign currency, US dollars and euros, directly back into the local domestic economy.
And we really need to look closely at what the blueprint calls the loophole, because this is the absolute crux of the financial strategy.
Okay, what's the loophole?
Over 80% of the funding for Baykar's next-generation platforms is completely self-funded through those foreign export revenues.
Wow.
So the Turkish taxpayer is not paying for the research and development of their country's newest AI-guided loitering munitions.
I want to pause there for you listening because loitering munitions is a technical term we should definitely clarify. We are basically talking about kamikaze drones, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Aircraft that just wait up in the sky, loitering around a target area until they identify a threat and then crash into it to destroy it.
That is the precise mechanism,
Thanks.
yeah. And they are highly complex, very expensive to develop, and they require constant software iteration. The genius of this loophole is that wealthy foreign buyers, not domestic taxpayers, are paying for that expensive iteration.
I can totally see how Finland could apply this. Finland has a unique status as a highly trusted, secure NATO hub. They could leverage that reputation to build niche, high-end, exportable tech.
Like what?
Things like incredibly secure encrypted communication networks or electronic warfare systems designed to jam enemy drones.
Yeah.
You export those globally, bring in the hard currency, and use it to subsidize your own domestic military.
Exactly.
But wait, isn't there a massive security risk in selling your cutting-edge defense tech to 30 different countries? You are putting your best hardware out into the wild where potential future adversaries can buy it, take it apart, reverse engineer it, and figure out exactly how to defeat it.
Well, it is a significant risk, yes. And reverse engineering absolutely does happen. You cannot put hardware into the global market and expect it to remain a secret forever.
Right.
But they accept that risk because of a very specific calculation. They are not selling the bleeding edge. The strategy relies on selling your current generation of technology to fund the research and development of your next generation of weapons.
I see. So it's a deliberate timeline gap.
Exactly. By the time an export partner receives the current model drone, uncrates it, trains their pilots, and finally integrates it into their military, your private domestic companies are already 2 years deep into developing a faster, smarter, stealthier version.
And that new development is...
Funded. Funded entirely by the check the foreign partner just wrote.
Oh, wow.
You are always keeping the ultimate, classified, cutting-edge technology for your own military. You are essentially using the global market to subsidize your own technological leapfrogging.
You're literally making your customers finance their own obsolescence.
It is a very cold calculus, but it is necessary when you don't have the budget of a superpower.
Okay, so this covers the agile tech, the drones, the software, the AI. But there is a massive ceiling to this approach, right?
Yeah, the heavy stuff.
Right. You can build agile private companies and fund them with foreign exports, but what about the ultra-complex, heavy hardware that a startup simply cannot build from scratch? Like, a small team of 50 engineers in a warehouse cannot just iterate a stealth fighter jet or a Patriot missile defense system. The barrier to entry in heavy aerospace is just too high.
Right, and the blueprint addresses this limitation directly. It argues that a small country shouldn't even attempt to build fifth-generation fighter jets or advanced air defense from scratch. It's just a waste of capital.
So what do they do?
Instead, you siphon that deep industrial knowledge directly from the giants. You use your strategic geopolitical importance to force massive U.S. defense contractors, companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, into aggressive joint ventures.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You are moving from domestic innovation to forced technology transfer. The source uses Turkey's history with the F-35 fighter jet program as the prime example here.
Exactly.
Because before Turkey was ultimately removed from that program due to geopolitical disputes, they used their position as a buyer to maximize what they could extract. They didn't just write a massive check and buy finished F-35s off the shelf like a normal customer.
No, they understood that simply buying the jet does absolutely nothing for your own domestic capabilities, so they demanded co-production frameworks.
Right.
They mandated that Turkish Aerospace Industries, TAI, had to actively co-manufacture the fuselages and the complex electronic components. And we really need to look at how this physically works on the ground.
Because they don't just hand you a manual.
Exactly. You don't just get a blueprint and a manual. Local Turkish engineers were physically embedded into the supply chains of these U.S. defense giants. They observed the factory floor. They learned how top-tier U.S. military hardware is machined, how the microscopic tolerances are managed, and how the software integration is actually coded.
It's essentially like getting hired as a line cook at a Michelin star restaurant just to learn their secret recipes and supply chains, and then quitting to open your own incredibly successful food truck right across the street.
That is the exact mechanism of a technology transfer. It's a perfect analogy. Because once those local engineers absorbed that invaluable know-how, they spun it off into their own independent, domestic, private programs.
So they bypassed decades of expensive trial and error.
Yeah, by legally forcing the global market leaders to teach them the process.
Let's apply this forced learning to Finland today. Finland is currently executing a massive buyout of American F-35 fighter jets. According to this blueprint, they cannot just be passive buyers waiting for the delivery. They must aggressively mandate what are called strict offset agreements.
Let's define an offset agreement quickly, because it is the absolute cornerstone of defense economics. An offset agreement basically means that if Finland is going to spend $10 billion buying jets from an American company, that American company is legally required to reinvest a percentage of that money back into the Finnish economy.
So Helsinki needs to force a company like Lockheed Martin to establish advanced maintenance hubs, software integration labs, physical component manufacturing facilities,
Yeah.
all inside Finland's borders.
Yes.
And crucially, those facilities need to be operated by Finnish private subcontractors,
Right.
not just American expats.
Exactly. It ensures that the knowledge transfer permanently sticks within the borders. It elevates the entire baseline of Finland's domestic engineering capability. The moment you execute a proper offset agreement, you aren't just buying planes, you're buying an elite education in aerospace engineering for your private sector.
Which feeds right back into the private startups we talked about in the first step.
Right.
The engineers who learn at the Lockheed Martin Maintenance Hub eventually leave to start their own domestic drone companies. It is a brilliant self-feeding ecosystem.
It completely solves the knowledge deficit.